Welcome to the Afterlight podcast. I'm joined today by Michelle Price, writer and clairvoyant. She specializes in angel card, intuitive readings, but she can also do mediumship and past life connections. Michelle has a knack for getting to the root of a problem, and she's experienced in bringing through confirmation from the spirit world when a connection is made. Michelle, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
So, spirituality in general and all the modalities that you practice are some of the most fascinating, most fabulous things to talk about. So I know it's going to be an awesome hour that we spend together. First of all, before we sort of get started in everything that you do and the benefits of that, can you tell me a little bit about yourself and when did your spiritual journey really begin?
So I've been seeing spirit since I can remember, since I was really small, and I just thought it was something that everyone could do. It's one of those things. And,
Right.
You'd go to school and you'd be like, hey, this person was in my room, and everyone's like, what? So yeah, it turns out that it's not something that everyone can do. But from my earliest memories, probably from about the age of 3 or 4, I remember a lady coming into my room pretty much every night. She had no facial features, no sort of fingers or anything. She had hands but no fingers, and she had kind of an old-fashioned skirt, blouse and a hat, and she was all sort of in these shades of like peach and white, and she used to just stand at the foot of my bed, and she was there pretty much every night, and it felt very protective, and I was never scared of her. And when we moved to Queensland, that was in New South Wales, when we moved to Queensland, she disappeared. I never saw her again. So yeah, that's sort of how it started. I've always been able to sort of see. She didn't say anything to me specifically, like there would never be a message, but it was more just her presence, and it just felt quite safe.
I think that one of the issues is that if you're someone like myself, for example, who I have no recollection of seeing spirit when I was younger or anything like that, kind of being almost afraid of it now. Would you say that one of the gifts of a lot of mediums and clairvoyants is that they sort of started when they're young, so they were almost able to push through that fear?
Yeah.
Other people like myself have to work on that.
Yeah. You might find this surprising, Lauren, but what I've found from speaking to a lot of people who do the work that I do as well is we all had difficult childhoods. We all had very challenging childhoods where we maybe had a parent that wasn't kind of present or that sort of thing. So what that spirit for me was it was kind of taking the role of my mother. So in a lot of situations, where I've spoken to other people who are doing this, they've all said something very similar, where the spirit came in and took on the role maybe of one of their parents, or, if they were in a dangerous situation or a threatening situation at home, the spirit kind of acted as a bit of a protector. So for me, like I think I turned somewhat to the spirit world for that protection if I couldn't get it, in reality. So I actually feel safer around spirit, and I'll get into a bit of the work that I do, but it's certainly in the work I do, I feel safer around the non-human world sometimes than the human world.
Yeah. So can you tell me a little bit about what is a clairvoyant and what is a medium exactly?
It's a really good question. It's quite a common question because a lot of people think it's the same thing. So clairvoyant, in terms of the actual translation, is literally to see. So clair is the ability, and then the voyant is voyeur, to see. So a French word. So it's literally just being able to, I started out as a dreamer. So I would go to sleep and I would have dreams, and my understanding is if they're in color, then that's, seeing into that's something that's actually going to happen. If it's black and white, it may be just a dream. So that's a distinction. So if I have someone come to me and say, look, I had this dream, all these things happened, and my first question is always, is it in color or not? And if it's in color, then it's probably something that's going to happen. And so clairvoyance is literally just, I might be sitting with a client and I might have a story playing out. I might see her, in this business role doing all these things. So it's more of a vision. Whereas the mediumship side of it is I might have her uncle come into the room and I'm like, your Uncle John's here. He looks like A, B, and C. He's telling me this. So I'm more connecting directly with the spirit. So that's the mediumship connection versus clairvoyancy.
Okay. So with, in regards to clairvoyancy, when you talk about vision, do you see these visions playing out in real life, like I'm looking at you. For our listeners at home, we are on a Zoom call, so I'm able to look at Michelle. Do you see it like that, or do you see it like in your imagination? What does it look like for you exactly?
Yeah. So it's different for different people. For me, I see through my third eye. So that little space between your eyebrows. I always close my eyes in readings. So I'll be sitting here with my eyes shut. And then, I guess it's like an imagination kind of thing. And this is a tricky thing when you get into this sort of work, Lauren, is that this is a conversation I've had with many other people in this industry, is that it's difficult sometimes when you're getting used to this, when you have, let's say, thoughts or, words and things land in your head, or even visions. You've got to sort of go, is that from me or is that from someone else? And that's the distinction that you kind of have to make in the beginning. And it is hard, but when you get used to it, you almost instantly know, because often I smell as well. So I've got the clairsentience ability. So if a spirit comes in, I'll often smell something very sweet, floral, fragrant, like a perfumey type smell. Cigar is really common, smoking if they're a smoker. So I'll often smell that. Then I'll feel the presence of the spirit, and then it sort of progresses from there. And there's a bunch of different signs and things that happen in the lead up, usually to me having a vision or a message come through. But there is in the beginning, it's really hard, to distinguish between what's in my head and what's coming in from another source.
Yeah. So how did you sort of start with that? Because I think that I would imagine that a large part of the work that you do would be down to trusting what you're getting and not judging it. And, a lot of the mediums that I've watched on YouTube or in person, they often can deliver something that almost seems uncomfortable to say, but makes sense to the person that they're reading for. So is a lot of this development based on trust, or is it also based on practice?
Yeah, it's definitely based on trust. And I think my interest, by way of explanation, really escalated when I went to New York, and we stayed in a place in Manhattan that was really severely haunted. And it was one of the most amazing, exciting experiences of my life. I loved it. Loved. And I'll tell you this because it's a funny story. And this is how, I got into what I'm doing now. Went with my husband. We stayed in this apartment. It was like a 3-story apartment with like this kind of, I don't know, dungeon thing underground or something, and didn't know about that. And all these spirits came into the room, and I'm like lying in this bed. And what had happened was we were in one of those, like, it's like an Airbnb type thing, but the owners lived there as well. So we were in a room we weren't supposed to be in. Usually the Airbnb people stayed in a different room on a different level, but we were in their guest room. And clearly the spirits weren't happy about it because we're lying in bed. And all these people have marched in the room, and I'm looking through my third eye and I'm going, oh, that's interesting. There's a maid over there and there's a dog over there and it looks like A, B, and C, and there's some dark dude standing over there in the corner. And they're all shouting at me going, what are you doing in this room? You're not supposed to be in this room. And I'm telling Jason all of this, and we're about to go to sleep. And he's, not thrilled about all this sort of stuff. And he's like, oh, I don't want to know. Anyway, he tried to go to sleep. So we've gone to sleep somehow. Basically, they didn't want us to be in the room. We went to sleep, and he's woken up the whole bed. And it was one of those, like, it had a frame, like a metal cast iron sort of frame. The whole bed is shaking, right? And I'm asleep. He's woken up, and the cast iron is just, it's hitting the whole thing. And he's like looking at me, and he's like, he said I was speaking in tongues. I don't remember any of it, but apparently I was speaking in tongues. The bed's shaking, and he's like, what on earth is going on? Anyway, somehow he managed to go back to sleep. In the morning, he told me what happened. And I was like, oh, well, I guess that proves that they don't want us in the room. Yeah. So we chatted to the owner, and he said, look, you can't stay downstairs because we've got this other couple there. But so I went back in, and I just said to the spirits, look, guys, this is the deal. We're going to move in a couple of days. And they were cool. So when I explained it to them, and this is why I wanted to say this, because you realize then that this is a real connection. If you have a connection to spirit, and you can explain to them, look, we're just doing some renovations. When this is done, all the noise will stop. Whatever you have to explain, they just need to know. And if they're sitting there on the other side, no one can hear them, no one can see them, it can be really, really frustrating. So it was kind of that moment where I was like, oh, okay, like I really got the connection. Yeah. And then we had a great time, and they were fine. Like, they were fine with us. Yeah. And so when I got back to Australia, I joined a paranormal group. So it sort of started from there.
So I do want to hear a lot about the paranormal group. We'll get to that in a minute. Before that though, when you mentioned that to the owner of the Airbnb, did they seem surprised?
we actually didn't mention it. We just kept it to ourselves. Yeah, because it was, there was a bit of dark stuff in the place. I didn't really want to frighten them. And that's the decision that sometimes you have to make, where people do get afraid of that sort of thing. And, you know, they're living in there and they're happy. So I didn't really feel like I wanted to upset that equilibrium by saying that. If I get called to someone's house for that purpose, then that's a different sort of thing. But we were just there as guests, and I just left it at that.
So that is one of the things that you do, is that right? That you actually go to, let's say, for lack of a better term, haunted homes and places, and you do help to move spirit on. Can you tell me a little bit about that process? Yeah,
so this is something that people have a little bit of difficulty wrapping their minds around. So I start with what's called a remote viewing. If people haven't heard that term, what it basically means, and I learned to do this when I did my Reiki course. So you learn to kind of travel, you know, using your inner self or inner being or spirit self. You use that self to travel to a remote location, and that's called remote viewing. So what I do with that is I come out of my body essentially in kind of meditation state, and then I travel to the house in question. So I always get first names and like a location. Could just be a street. I don't even need to have like a street number. I go to the house and I literally walk through. So I can tell where rooms are, where kitchens are, the whole layout. I can see everything like I'm actually physically in the house, which often surprises people. But see, this is why we need permission. So it sounds a little, you know, scary and confronting, but I need to get their permission because I am going to be in their house. That's part of the universal law. And what's really funny with this is, and what you said before about trusting is, one of the first ones that I did like this, I was very early on in investigating homes and haunted houses and stuff, is I was looking at this family, and they were all blonde and blue-eyed and fair skin and very, you know, all very similar looking, all the children and the mother. And then I saw this Asian man in the vision as well, and I'm like, that's funny. I don't know how that would fit. And I was thinking, oh, it must be a mistake. Anyway, I got to the house, and sure enough, the family looks like what I saw. And then an Asian man walked out of one of the rooms, and they had an exchange student. So, wow. You know, you have to trust. You always have to trust spirit, because I was sort of doubting. I'm like, oh, I don't know. I'll leave that bit out, but I like all the other stuff, you know. But it was genuine. And they said, yeah, we've got this exchange. We always have exchange students. So you just have to trust spirit.
That's amazing. So does somebody basically go, there's something that doesn't feel right in my home, and they would call someone like you, and then you do a remote viewing to sort of scan the house. And then what happens next?
So with the scan, what I'm looking for primarily is there actually something supernatural there? We do get some cases where there's mental health issues, drugs, and electrical problems. A lot of people don't realize, if you live in an apartment and you have like a fuse box or anything inside your house where there's a lot of power and a source, you know, of power, and even fridges, alarm clocks, all those sorts of things, we use EMF monitors, so that electromagnetic frequency, they pick that up. EMF is actually what a spirit lives off, so that actually charges up a spirit, and it's what they give off. So it's all it overlaps. And so a lot of people don't realize, if they've got something that's, you know, a fuse box in their apartment and they're walking past it. We had a house like that with a hallway, and the fuse box was in the hallway. So all the bedrooms were off this hallway, and people were just having visions and hallucinations. There actually wasn't anything supernatural, but they were all having hallucinations and visions. So it can actually cause, and this is something that, you know, people should know, it can actually cause hallucinations and visions. So it could be electrical, it could be drug related, or mental health. So I need to rule all of that out. And that's why my group got me on board, so that I could rule that out, because we don't need to go out to houses if that's a situation and there's nothing supernatural there. So that's the start. So based on that, if there is something supernatural, then myself, and we had, you know, 3 or 4, depending on the time, 3 or 4 other mediums, psychic mediums and clairvoyants, we would all head out with our scientific team. So the scientific team has all the equipment, the mounted cameras, all that sort of stuff, and we would conduct an investigation.
Right. So do you go into the house at night, or can you conduct an investigation in light?
Yeah, that's another good question. You can do it during the daytime. But what we tend to ask people is, when is the activity, you know, at its peak? And often you'll find it's very after midnight, very early morning, witching hour, you know, 2 or 3 in the morning is very common. So we generally find that we do investigations from about midnight onwards. And we could be at a house, because we've got a van with a load of cameras, like stacks and stacks of cameras. And then we have all those cameras that they're connected to, that the little TV screens are connected to, mounted throughout the house. So we may be in an investigation for 6 to 8 hours, you know, throughout that midnight to 8 a.m. or 6 a.m. sort of period. But the most activity you'll see is usually between sort of midnight and 3 a.m. is when it sort of picks up.
And so when you're trying to, I'm under the impression that you're trying to capture images of the spirit, you're trying to see the behavior happen in front of you. If that happens and the spirit, do you talk to the spirit and see whether or not they want to help moving, like changing location, going to the light, or any of these sort of things? Is that what happens?
Yeah. So from my perspective, I mean, I don't need evidence because I can sort of see, communicate, feel, smell, the whole thing. It's more the scientific people and I guess the general public who follow us is that they want evidence. So that's why we have that sort of, you know, evidence-based, here's our photos, here's our supporting documentation or vision. So what I will say to start with is that there's been many occasions where I'll say, okay, we've got children over here, they're doing A, B, and C, and we have temperature gauges. So we'll pop the temperature gauge over there where the spirit is sitting, and we'll usually see about a 4 to 5 degree fluctuation. So it might just suddenly drop by 4 to 5 degrees. So that's, you know, evidence that there's someone there. The other thing that we do, and I had a really great example of this in one of the houses we investigated, was we were communicating with a little boy, and little boy was holding my hand. And I said to the group, little boy's holding my hand. And then I was holding out what's called a K2 meter, which actually measures the presence of a spirit. It's kind of an EMF, you know, device, and it shows you in lights. So it goes from red, orange, yellow, and green. And so you want to see a bit of a reading. You want to see those lights kind of flashing on and off. And you can actually basically use that to get yes and no answers. So if you're communicating with a spirit and they're saying, you know, yes, you might say flash to orange, and green might be no. So yes and no. So that's how you sort of communicate. So I was saying to the little kid, you know, do you understand all of this? This is how the lights work, blah, 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 blah. And I'm holding his hand. And then I heard it I heard it through my ears, psychically. No one else heard anything in the room, but on the recording device, we had a recording device, like a ghost box, and through the ghost box, everyone heard yes. So we went back through it. You listened to my question, and that's why whenever you ask a question, you always pause and wait for a response.
Right.
So we didn't hear it. They didn't hear it with their physical ears, but the yes came through, and it was a little boy's voice on the box, and everyone was like, "Whoa!" So that's the sort of thing that we're chasing with that.
When you're holding the hand of a spirit like that, do you feel their physical hand, or is it more?
It's not like holding your husband or wife's hand. So it's not that sort of physical sensation, but it's like it sounds weird. It's kind of like pressure, warmth, but sort of a pressure or just sort of a presence, a bit like, I guess, like, you know, holding a feather or something very, very light, and and sort of an awareness, I guess, as well. So, and that's quite common with children, because children are actually generally just very scared, and they will gravitate to other children if they have toys and things to play with, because that's kind of fun. So more often than not, they're not threatening. And I'm quite a maternal person, so often when I'm in a house, the children will come to me. So most of us in our group, Lynn tends to gravitate to, one of our colleagues tends to gravitate to the older spirits, whereas I'm almost always babies, toddlers, children, and young people. So most of us, for some reason, she used to be a paramedic. I don't know if that made a difference, but we tend to have certain spirits come to us. Don't know why.
Wow. So when you are dealing with like in this situation with that child, do you talk to the child and say, hey, do you want to go? I keep using the light example because one time I was to a hotel and I walked into this room, and I was traveling alone, and I was overwhelmed with sadness and just, I don't know how to explain it other than I couldn't stay there. I was so scared and sad, and it was just the craziest feelings ever. And I remember in my mind, I saw a couple of dark, sort of shadowy type in there. And I left that, and I asked to go to a different hotel room. And a friend of mine said, when you feel comfortable, you should sit down and you should imagine those beings and send them to the light. Is that sort of what you would then do to help that spirit?
Absolutely. It depends on who it is, and it depends on if they're earthbound or not. So the main distinction, the first thing that I look at is, are they earthbound or are they just visiting? So often what we find is when someone has a baby, grandma, grandpa grandpa, they may have passed over, but they may have come back to look after that little newborn and keep an eye on them. So if they've already gone through the light, we don't need to worry about that. And we just let the family know, hey, it's granddad, grandma, you know, they're cool. They're just looking after your little newborn. And we find that happens a lot. Like I've had a friend of mine who was woken, like literally shaken awake by her mother-in-law who passed away because her baby had stopped breathing. So she saved her baby's life because she was a really heavy sleeper. So that's an example of that. She had already crossed over. She didn't need to cross over again. So the way we tell that is an earthbound is denser. So Earth is heavy. The energy on Earth is heavy. So the energy of an earthbound spirit, and they can be earthbound for a variety of reasons. Often it's a sudden passing. So it could be murder, something unexpected. They had a severe accident, car accidents and things like that. So something sudden, you could find yourself earthbound. So as a psychic medium, we feel the density of that spirit, and you can tell pretty much straight away if, they're earthbound. The other guys are a lot lighter and they just feel different. So if we determine that they're earthbound, and if we determine that the people, because sometimes the people in the house are like, oh, it's just a little kid, don't worry about it, just leave them here. We ask the permission of the residents. So if the residents do want us to move them on, then we'll make the decision to move them on. And it's as simple as what you said. It's simple as creating a light. And so myself and my teammates who are in the group are all Reiki. We all do Reiki. Mm-hmm. So we all use our hands. They call them light workers. So we use our hands and we create the light. And that's sort of a visualization, projection, the whole lot. And so we combine and we sort of use our skills. I'm waving my hands around madly, but no one can see me, so that's okay. Yes, we create the light and then we just explain. And it is different for children and different age groups too, because we move on babies, we move on, different age groups. And so it's difficult for me to communicate to a baby, a toddler, a little child who's scared what they need to do. So often we'll ask someone from the spirit world, someone they may have known who's passed over, to come back and get them. So often we'll see, an arm reach out, or someone might, their upper body sort of might come out of the light and they might hold on to the child and take them through.
Wow.
So it depends on the age group. I've had skeptics, Lauren. I mean, there's spirits that we've come across who are earthbound. One gentleman in particular, and he was very argumentative, and he was like, I was a Christian and I went to church and I don't believe in psychics. And he was very, very opinionated. And that doesn't change. People think that they go on the other side and they had this amazing experience. And, he died suddenly. And so he was kind of, bang, here I am, earthbound, stuck. No one can see him or hear him. He was incredibly frustrated. It took a long time for us to convince that guy to move over, but we did. But we're like, mate, we can see and hear you. This is an opportunity for you to go. And his wife was on the other side. She reached out, grabbed him. He went through. He was as happy as Larry. So people's personalities don't necessarily change just because they've passed away. But yes, the light is super important. And look, the light, the best way to explain it is it's just love. So our source, the source, I believe, of all of us as humans, our source is love. That's ultimately what we came from. That's what we go back to. And that's what the light is. And so when we have the light in a room, and we can leave the light there for 24 hours and then we can program it to close when we want to. If there's, we've been in houses where there's so many spirits, like we'd have to be there all night moving them through. So we're just programming it. We go, can you stay open for 24 hours? All you guys need to go through the light. They all just want to get the hell out of there. So they're like more than happy. And then we can leave and let that sort of take place.
Right.
But it's just the most amazing feeling. That light is just pure love. It's amazing. And that's why people have near-death experiences and they don't want to come back.
Yeah, exactly. So one thing that really struck me when you're talking about all that is protection. How do you protect yourself from not absorbing those energies, from not being weighted down by that? Like, what are your grounding techniques, or how do you protect yourself?
That's a really funny story, actually. I've got a little backstory. I had no idea. I went to New York, as I said, had the haunted experience, came back and I'm like, right, let's do this. So I had no idea. So I just joined the group and I'm like, yeah, guys, I'm great. I'm good to go. Let's do this. I can communicate. I know that.
Yeah.
So I hadn't even thought about protection. So I went on to my first case. It ended up being very, very dark. And I was like, I had a crystal. My friend had given me like an angel rose quartz shaped into an angel. Yeah. And I had this thing and I had it in my hand, like, this is my protection. And I marched through this and it didn't work. So I went to that house a few times and it was just super dark. My little crystal, and this is what happens when crystals have had enough, they smash. Like they basically just take their own life, essentially. And so I got home from one of these investigations at this particular house. It was very, very dark. My crystal flew out of I didn't let it go. Like, I love this little crystal. It flew out of my hand and smashed into a million pieces on the ground in front of me. And I was devastated. So I took myself off to like a crystal shop to get a new crystal. But I also said to the ladies behind the counter, I was like, how do I protect myself? Like, I'm using this for paranormal investigations and stuff. Like, I'm thinking I'm protecting myself. And no one could tell me, like, no one had any ideas. So in the end, Lynn, who I mentioned before, who's one of my team members, she came into the group from another group and she became my mentor. So she taught me how to protect myself. So at a basic level, what she taught me was just to put yourself in a bubble. Yeah. And this is a very, very basic, you know, in a bubble or an egg. I used to use an egg. So when I did my remote viewings, I wasn't actually protecting myself. So strange things started to happen at my house. Yeah. Because that's what you're doing. You're opening a channel. So I was just like, wee, you know, just connecting and not doing anything at all to protect myself. It's so dangerous, Lauren. I can't even tell you. So people who are getting into this or considering getting into this, that at a very basic level, you must protect yourself, because some of the stuff that was going on in my house was very scary. Yeah. So bubble or an egg. So when I started getting involved, I used to imagine myself in this big egg, and it was very, very thick walls, and I had a little door on it, and I'd go in and it was very comfortable and swayed and, you know, very nice inside and very comfortable. And I'd lie down and I'd shut the door, and then I could almost, it's very interesting, I could feel the presence of, you know, spirit and things on the outside, but nothing could get inside this egg. Yeah. So it's really about being very firm and very practiced and very methodical. And so I set up all of my remote viewings, readings, everything the same way now. So if I have someone come to my space, it's the same thing. I protect my house, I protect my room that we're in, and they'll always come in and go, oh, wow, like it feels great in here. Good, you know, what have you done? Yeah. And I've just neutralized the energy. So there's no energy, basically. There's nothing negative, positive, everything's just neutral. And that's the starting space, so that we can sort of commune. And then, you know, during the reading, emotions and things come up. And so it's just a really nice neutral space. So that's what I do permanently. But at a basic level, to everyone getting started in this, I would suggest an egg or bubble or something similar to that. Often you can imagine a mirror, imagine a mirror on the outside. So it's reflecting everything off it. So I do that when I go to the shop. You know, people pick up stuff just going to the supermarket.
That's a good idea. Almost like like an armor of mirrors.
Correct. I use it all the time. You have angry drivers. You know, the first thing I do is I shield. If I have someone, you know, next to me in the car and they're carrying on like a pork chop, I shield. So that's literally, it feels like putting up a wall. And you have energy thieves, you know, who come up really close to you and you're like, oh, what's going on here? And you can sort of feel them trying to take your energy or something. Yeah. Same thing. I just shield. And so that will be like an instant kind of, you know, you've already protected yourself in the morning, you got your bubble on, but some of them can get through those. And so you just kind of put up an extra sort of shield, and it is a bit like armor. I can imagine armor.
Yeah. Do you ground do you protect yourself every day, or only when you're doing this kind of work? Aside from the shielding, obviously, because I understand what you said. Yeah, I'll be honest, and I should. So the answer is yes, I should protect myself every day, but I don't. So often it is more so when I'm doing circle work or readings and investigations and things like that. But the recommendation is that we do this on a daily basis. I definitely cleanse as a little easy process you go through in the shower every morning, where you imagine the water being sort of rainbow colours. And sort of covering, you know, your body, and you sort of watch it psychically, you know, through your third eye go down the drain, and it might be sort of dirty looking, and then you wait for it to be, you know, nice and rainbowy and all of that. And that's just a really simple little cleansing technique. So cleansing and protection are two very different things. So you could be protecting yourself in a bubble every day, but you could be protecting, like keeping in all the yucky stuff too. So it's really important to imagine that sort of rainbow light. And the shower's easy because we do it every day. So that's a habitual thing. And then putting on your bubble, you can jump out of the shower, you've done your cleansing, and then you put your bubble on and off you go. But if you're not doing the cleansing, you're holding in all of that. One thing that I know really surprised me is I talked to somebody who works in the healthcare industry and deals with lots of different personalities, and they were really tired and lethargic and stuff. And I did quiz them about the cleansing process, and they didn't have one. So I recommended the shower technique as well, but I used light. I love the idea of using rainbow colors. I think I'll integrate that now. It's so much more. I did have a question about, I just wanted to ask your opinion on this. So I have a friend and she is getting involved in spiritual work like this, and she probably has some tendencies towards psychic mediumship, and she's quite heavy. I said to her, maybe you're not grounding, and that's why you're carrying all this weight, because your body is intuitively trying to keep you down, closer to the ground. What do you think about that idea? And do you use a grounding technique as well?
What I'll say about that is the size that I am now, I was actually 20 kilos heavier before I started doing the work that I do. So this may go some way to explain what's going on with your friend. I was 20 kilos heavier, couldn't shift it. And one day I was like, I just said to myself, look, I want to do this work. I want to be in the public eye. So I want to be, doing the readings, but also have like a presence out in the community. And doing my circles. Like, this is before I started doing circles and public events. And I was like, I can't look like this. I don't feel like, because I've traveled and I've seen my, inner self, my spirit self, my spirit self looked completely different. Yeah. My spirit self looked like the physical form that I wanted to have. And so for me to be able to go out there and do all the work I want to do, I need to look more like my inner self, like my spirit self. Like, I feel like that is what our essence is, if that makes sense. Yeah. So that's what I looked at. I looked at my spirit self and I was like, yep, that's what I want to look like. And then the weight just fell off. I can't even explain it. Like, it was literally, my husband was like, what on earth is going on? He had no idea. The 20 kilos just dropped off within a few months. And then I look like what I look like today. So a really healthy weight, and I wasn't before. And then I started work. So it was like, I don't know if that helps with your friend situation, but it's almost like you make the conscious decision, because what the weight does is, for me, it was just holding me back. It was like, oh, I can't be in the public eye because of this thing. Yeah. And as soon as I made the decision, I was like, I want to look like that. I want to look like my inner spirit self to be able to do the work that I'm doing. And I guess my prayers were answered, and the weight just fell away. It just didn't matter anymore. And I've been like that ever since. I was doing heaps of exercise too before. It was really interesting, but just wouldn't shed. So it's like making that conscious choice. It's like saying to the universe, divine love, whatever you believe in, I want to do this work. If you can help me, get to look the way I want to look, to be able to present myself to the public, then let's do it. Let's do this thing. And it happened. I made the deal. Yeah.
I do want to talk to you about asking for help in a minute, because I think that's such an important thing. And I know that you do angel readings as well, and they don't intervene unless they are asked for help. But before that, do you know much about crystals? Because I have this beautiful crystal, and I got it,
quartz.
And I got it from a friend, right? And the same day I was holding it on my my tummy, and I had it accidentally fell asleep. And when I woke up, I knocked it off and it smashed in two. So it just made me think about what you were talking about, and when I said that to her, I was so upset because she'd just given it to me. And her response was, oh, I'm surprised it didn't break earlier. So it was such an interesting thing. Do you hold on to crystals once they've broken like that? Can you use both parts? Do you have any knowledge on?
So, I was saying before about my crystal that flew out of my hands and smashed on the ground. It had enough. So the first thing that I do with all my crystals now is I make sure they're all clean and happy. So I've actually done a course. I'm a Pranic Energy Healer too. So I've actually done a course. One of our courses is crystals, all about crystals, programming, cleansing, why they throw themselves out of your hands and smash, all of that sort of stuff. So I've actually done, a whole level on that. So what I make sure with my crystals now is that they are clean and happy, because some of the crystals I'll use them at work, and I'll get them I'll program them to, take away negative energy, take away energy from other people, all that sort of stuff. So they're processing all day, every day. And I need to give them permission to not have to do that, and also to clean them, so they can start again. So with your crystal, when it's smashed, when, chopped in half or whatever the, situation is, which is what's happened with your rose quartz, your clear quartz, they need to be returned to the soil. So there's no purpose for it. You can't, and this is to the best of my knowledge and the research that I've done, it's not useful to you or the crystal once it's done that, because it's kind of made the decision, it's cut the the cord, I guess, to you. And so the best thing you can do for that crystal is return it to the soil. So I've got plants in my office, and any crystals that I've had smash or, you know, something similar to what you've had, I put them in the soil. So you can still keep them, like keep them in your presence and around you. But they came from the soil, they came from the land, and that's where they want to go back to. So it's really important, and it's honouring the crystal to return it to soil. So you can either bury it in your garden. On a side note, fairies love crystals and bright, sparkly things. So if you have a little fairy garden or anything like that, put your broken crystals out there, put little bits of alfoil, not great for the environment, but fairies love it. So you can stick it in your garden or just in a pot in your house. But yeah, return them to the soil. That's a respectful thing to do. And you can still admire it then.
Yes, true. Okay, well, thank you for that. I appreciate it. So before we continue on, I think it's important for our listeners to understand the difference between a psychic medium and a medium and a psychic.
Yeah, I'm probably not an expert on it, but, you know, a friend of mine, quite well known in that industry, Amanda de Warren, so she is an animal communicator, but she calls herself a psychic medium. So by way of, I guess, using her as an example, if you were just a medium, you know, the spirit comes through and it will just be a conversation, and you relay that conversation that you've had to the person. I guess the psychic medium part of it is more, you know, using the clairs and bringing the other things into it. So the senses, like using all the senses. So yes, you could have a conversation. I'm doing mediumship, you know, that's having the conversation and it's kind of at that level. But then you bring in, you know, the senses and the visions and everything else into it. And then I'm guessing that's when it becomes a psychic mediumship. But yeah, I'm probably not an expert on that subject, but that's what I feel like.
Yeah, I think that sounds right in my experience as well. So what responsibility do you believe that psychic mediums have? And one of the reasons why I'm posing that question as well is, you know, when you were at your Airbnb in New York, as opposed to telling the owners that they had all these spirits living in their house, you made the decision not to do that.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I get asked that a lot because I've got friends who go to the dentist, and the dentist is in there in their mouth, and they're just having all these kind of visions and, you know, feelings and sensations about this person. And, you know, they come to me and they're like, do I say something? Like, what happens? Even with a hairdresser, usually if someone's touching you, like if I go in to have a massage or any kind of beauty treatment, I'll almost always get impressions about that person. And I trust my gut. So if I'm in there, and I've had it with my husband, we had like a couples massage, and I literally was downloading. It was so not relaxing, Lauren, I got to tell you. Yeah. I'm like lying on the table going, oh, I should be relaxing. But all I was doing was downloading information about the person who was massaging me. So during the whole thing, I'm like, okay, I was like seeing literally her entire life story in that moment. And I sort of said to Spirit, I was like, does she need to know this? Like, do I need to pass this information on? And I didn't do that in New York because I was very new to it. And the message was yes. The answer was yes. And so after the massage, I said, look, it's an exchange of energy. Yes, I paid for the massage, but also she's, you know, providing a really amazing service by doing that. And I felt like me telling her is kind of an exchange as well. Yeah. And so I, you know, told her what I saw, and she burst into tears, and Jason, my husband, left the room and left us to it. But yeah, she was very emotional because it was about her mother, and she was thinking about becoming her full-time carer. And I said, look, I can see you putting this ramp in at your house. It's like and this is before she told me anything. I just said, look, I can see this ramp. It's like a disabled ramp or something. You can put a wheelchair up it. I could see a house. I described a house, everything. And I said, I'm getting something about a carer and all of this. And then after I'd finished everything that I saw, I'm thinking about becoming a full-time carer for my mum, and it makes me really emotional because I have to quit my job and all this stuff. And she just broke apart. It was really, really upsetting for her. But I said to her, I can see you doing it. I can see the concrete ramp going in. You're obviously going to do it. So there was a reason Spirit wanted me there, you know, to connect to her and to reassure her that she's going to do it and that she has the strength to do it, because I think she kind of didn't know she had the strength to do it. Yeah. So there was a reason, you know, that she needed to hear that message. So what I say to people now is, you know, the dentist example, whatever it is, I'm like, just trust your gut. And I feel like in most situations, if Spirit is communicating to you when you're, you know, with somebody in the presence of someone else, more often than not, that person needs to hear that message. I think in New York, it was a unique situation where spirit was directly communicating to us that we weren't supposed to be in that room. And so that was like an agreement or an exchange between us more than the householders. But yeah, I definitely say to people, if you have impressions like that, then I think the person needs to know. And my conversations hopefully have changed those people's lives, because I do it a lot. Almost every time I get a massage, here we go again.
Yeah. Do you think that
I got to tell them?
That's one of the fears I think people have with mediums, though, is that they'll almost get into their personal lives, or, almost break that boundary. I know you asked for before about permission and stuff like that. So, what are your thoughts on that, I guess?
It's universal law. So what I was saying before about permission is true, because I'm going into their personal space and going to their house and I'm looking at their family and stuff like that. So when I'm getting a massage and things like that, that touch instantly for me, I don't know if that's considered permission. Maybe it's considered permission at a certain level. That as soon as I'm in contact with another human being, I'm downloading information. So I don't tend to touch people unless they're within, my circle. That's part of, I guess, that universal law, that if the connection is made, then I will see degrees of information. I'm not going in, I'm not getting a massage and I'm not seeing that person in the shower. You know what I mean? It's not that personal. The information that I'm given is useful, is something that's useful to that person. That's what spirit wants. They're not showing me their, bedroom space and all that sort of stuff, because that's not useful. Yeah. So, and I'm not, whatever I need to tell them, it's something to do with a decision that they're making. They're at a crossroads. It's something helpful. And I don't think in my experience that I've ever seen anything, even with my remote viewing after I have permission, I'm not seeing anything that's embarrassing necessarily or really super personal to that person. Yeah. Because I don't need to see that. It's not useful to me. Yeah. Yeah. Does that make sense? Yeah. I think it's that universal order, universal law. I think it just kind of knows what we need. What we need and what you need to tell them, or what they need to hear, et cetera. Yeah. So. Good example, Lauren. Sorry, I will just say something very quickly, is we are truth seekers. So one of my abilities, and not everyone has this, but I have an ability to tell the difference very quickly between truth and lie. There was a lady that I did a reading for, and she said to my group, so I don't do all the bookings and all that sort of stuff, it goes through our management team. So she rang up and she said, I want a reading on my parents-in-law, because they have some supernatural presence in their home. And I just, from the beginning, I had this kind of, this isn't right kind of feeling, like there's something weird about this. And I told the group, I said, look, this is weird. I said, why is she requesting me to go into the house of her parents-in-law? What's her husband's involvement, or what does he think? All my alarm bells are going off, right? But the team's like, look, she's given permission. Can you just go in and check it out? So I said, did she give permission? And they said, yes. And I was like, okay. So I went in and I'm like looking at a grey wall. And this is the first experience I'd had like this, because people in the past had given permission and it was genuine. This wasn't genuine. So I'm in there and I'm going, all right, I've got the names, got the location, and I'm literally looking at a grey wall. That's all I could see. I couldn't get through it, couldn't see through it, couldn't get over it, nothing. I contacted the group and I was like, guys, I don't think she's got permission, because all I'm looking at is a grey wall. So she's obviously thinking, she's not experienced in this area, but the woman who made the request is thinking, oh, well, I'll just get this, person to go in there spiritually and kind of do their thing. And it won't matter that I haven't asked permission. They won't be able to tell. Yeah. But in that moment, I was like, this is actually a thing. Like this, I've just always said it because that's what I was told to tell them. You have to give me permission. But that was the first real example I'd had where I said to her, she was just trying to spy on them. She was literally trying to spy on them. So it doesn't work. The universe will not allow that. But I just thought that was a really good example.
Yeah, I love that. There are people in the world who believe that the work that you do, and the work that I also believe in, is a bunch of crap. What do you think about that, and does it actually matter?
I actually love it. I love it. When I started doing this work, I put out on some Facebook groups and things like that, hey guys, I'm going to do free readings, rah, rah, rah. Anyway, I was inundated with requests. Oddly, and it's not something that I expected, I think there was 5 or 6 complete skeptics that said, yes, I want a reading. I was really surprised. I was like, why would they say? But they were really open about it. They were like, I'm skeptical. I don't believe in this. I do think it's a load of bull crap. I want to come and see what you do. And I was like, cool. And they were men. I had a lot of requests from men. But yeah, there was about 5 who were real skeptical. Sat down in front of me, and I love it. Like, I was a bit nervous, but I was like, no, you know, like this is a genuine thing, what I'm doing. And as long as I have their permission and they're sitting in front of me, well, so be it. Whatever comes through is great. All of them sat down, all of them were in tears, and they left believers. Wow. So, you know, if someone's skeptical, bring it on. Like, I'm more than happy to sit down with you because spirit has other ideas. Spirit breaches those realms, and it doesn't matter what their belief is. As I said, with that guy in the kitchen that we saw, the spirit, you know, who was like, I don't believe in you guys. I go to church. I don't believe in mediums. You know, they don't change their perspective. But when we created the light and his wife reached out her arm, he went through. So, you know, that's what I have to say about that. If you're a skeptic, come and sit down with me, spend time with me. I haven't had a skeptic leave a skeptic. Let's just say that. Yeah,
that's so cool. I love that. So what role does mediumship play in your everyday life? Does it influence the way that you look at the world? When you have challenges that arise, does it help you to feel supported? And, you know, is it part of your everyday life?
Well, I will say it's very helpful when you're in a relationship or you're married. I was just thinking of a funny example when I was, not so much a mediumship, but when I was on a plane with Jason, we were playing Hangman, and I just kept reading his mind. So he went to write out the spaces, and I'm like, it's blah. And he was so angry. He's like, I don't want to play Hangman anymore. So yeah, it does come in useful. He actually put a post on Facebook about it. It was quite funny. But yeah, no, I do use it on a daily basis because often people need messages. Like I'll take my angel cards to work, for example, in my workplace. If I look at my cards and I'm like, I need to take my deck. I don't know why, but I'm going to take it. Guaranteed someone at work needs me, and I'll feel it when I get to work. I'm like, you need a reading, and I'll go in and do a reading. So I'm constantly connected. Spirit's constantly giving me information about who needs a connection, who needs information. So if I pick up my deck, I know it's for a reason. I know that I'm going to help someone. So every day, all my hair stands up when I say that. Every single day, I'm looking for ways to help people. I retain that connection with spirit to help me make those connections and to help those people. And often, like I'll sit here and I'll just put it out there and say, look, you know, if you need a connection or you need guidance or you're feeling a bit down or whatever, you know, please get in touch with me. And then I'll find that I'm fully booked for that week. So it's really powerful, you know, thoughts, words, actions, they're so powerful. So just even that thought out there, I find people will just reach out to me from all over the place. You know, they saw my business card somewhere, or it's pretty amazing.
It sounds to me like the big word, well, the word that came through to me when you were saying all that was service.
Yeah, 100%. That's what it is.
Yeah.
That's what it is. People come to me, and I want to say something around that is that, you know, when you go to see someone for a reading or whatever it is, please just let go of what you want. I've had some people come to me and they've sat there with only one goal in mind, and I'm sitting there and I'm reading and I'm saying all this stuff and I'm thinking, you know, I'm not feeling it, you know, connect to the other person. And I'm like, what is going on? And the first thing I say to people is, please let go of your expectation, because expectations are blockers. They block spirit. They block the messages and everything coming through. Yeah. And I just felt with this particular person, there was just this kind of force field there. And it turned out at the end of the whole thing, I'd said all this stuff and he's like not even responding. I wasn't getting any kind of response. And the end of it all, he just said, I want to know if my wife's going to die. She's got a brain tumor. That was it. That was the whole reason he came. So we had a conversation along those lines. And I did do a reading around that and give him some information about that. But he didn't want to hear any of the other stuff. And all the other stuff was just for him. And that made me really sad. I was like, you're potentially missing out on all these beautiful messages and all these words of encouragement. And he's a father of 3. Like, he had 3 beautiful children. His wife's been diagnosed with terminal illness. But he didn't hear any of the stuff for him. And it made me really sad. So that's what I want to say to people is, please let go of some of those expectations and just see what spirit wants to tell you.
I think that's so true, that people go to readings just to hear that so-and-so is going to marry them, or you know, it's going to be okay.
And we can do readings around that. That's no problem. But it's just, if you have this one expectation and this one thing that you want and you don't care about anything else, you're blocking. You're just blocking, and you're not going to get what you want ultimately. And that doesn't affect me, but it hurts me because I'm like, I want that for you. If you're going to come and spend the money and spend the time, I want that for you.
Yeah, I love that. Do you think anyone can learn these skills? Do you think you have to be born with it?
I teach as part of my little circles and gatherings that I do. I have people with, who say they have no abilities and they make connections. Got to figure out what the importance of, I guess, having someone who has been in this industry for a little while is. Everyone makes a connection in a different way. So even in my little paranormal group that I'm in, some of us are similar, some of us are different. So some of our members of the group will be able to look and just see spirit with their eyes, not through third eye. Some of us has through our third eye, but the girl who looks through her real eyes, she has no smell. She doesn't sense, through her smell, but we do. So everyone has skills in different areas and they all complement each other, and we all need, those different skills.
Yeah.
So when I have women come to me, or men, or, I've seen both, we try to figure out what their strength is. And often, I've got an excellent sense of smell in reality. So often what our physical strengths are, and I have really good seeing abilities, but I've always dreamed. So I've always had those premonitions and dreams and things. We find that translates into the spirit world. So some people, like I said before, if I have someone who wants to connect with a lost relative and they bring in their t-shirt or their favorite toy or their hat, then I can make a really strong connection through that because it's got their essence on it. So that's a really good skill, and not everyone can do that, but that's something that I teach because some people, they'll hold on to that object. Jewelry, we often use jewelry, things like car keys. You can even use car keys. That's psychometry. So some people will connect through psychometry really easily. Other people will get really frustrated with that and they just need to use cards. Everyone has strengths in different areas, but I've never found anyone who came into me and said, look, I don't feel like I have any abilities. They didn't have any abilities, because even when they're sitting there doubting themselves and saying these things and they're like, oh, I think this is really silly. But I've actually got one of the girls I have been mentoring for quite a while now. She came to me and she just was like, oh, this is really dumb. This is really silly. But she'd start every sentence like that. And then she'd say the most profound thing. And I'm like, oh, you have to stop starting every sentence with this may be silly or dumb, or this is probably my imagination. And really good example of that for her. And this was a turning point in her life because she had abilities. I knew she had abilities from the moment I met her. We were doing a little gathering and I brought through one of my friends who passed away from drugs, and I was getting everyone to connect to him and sort of describe what he looked like and all these different things. Anyway, she was describing someone completely different. She's like, I can see this very tall, 6 foot something man. He's in the army. He's got, all these sort of badges and different things. He looks like he was very important. He's like in his 60s, that and the other thing. And I'm going, well, that's not, the person that I've called into the group. And I had protected the circle. And you were asking about protection before. So I'll always protect our space, so that unless someone invites someone in, it's just, us and whatever the spirit is that I invited in. So it turns out one of the little boys, there was a 14-year-old boy who has abilities. His mum had brought him along. He was really scared when I brought my friend through. So he invited his pop in, and his pop was in the army. And he was exactly as Cassie described him. And what had happened was he had Pop standing in front of his mum, and Cassie was sort of next to the mother. So she was blocked from seeing my friend that I brought through. All she could see was this little kid's granddad who was right in front of her. She couldn't see anything else. It was really interesting, the conversation that I had with the little boy's mum afterwards, because she figured out what had happened. And she said, can you apologise to your friend? Because Cassie just thought she was going completely insane. And I said to her, no, you're actually connecting with the little boy's granddad. So that was life-changing for her. That was a moment where she was brave enough to speak about it and say, this is what I'm actually seeing. It's not what everyone else is seeing. And she was right. She was 100% right. So,
so
you just have to
that trust again, doesn't it?
100%. And it's changed her life. And now she does speak up, which is awesome.
I love that story. That was fabulous. So you say that you're involved in the paranormal project. What is paranormal exactly?
I guess paranormal and supernatural, I put them into the same category. Yeah. So it's something that can't be explained. It can be things moving around the house, things falling over, the smells, all those sort of senses. We would describe all of that as paranormal. So something that kind of can't be explained away as the wind, or something physical. Yeah. And the reason that our team come in with all the equipment is because primarily we're looking at, as I said before, is electricity a factor? Can we explain it away as being something sort of tangible and real, or is it coming from another space? And that's why I guess myself and the other team members who can sort of remote view, are really important, because we can jump in and go, yeah, this is paranormal. So it's not something that can be explained by the wind or something physical and real. And yeah, I guess that's the best way that I would explain it. But, you know, what I will say around that is radio stations, TV stations, cinemas, pubs, anywhere where there's a lot of energy and a lot of different kinds of energy. And movie cinemas are prolific, because you go in there and you go to laugh, or you go to cry, or you go to see action or drama. People go in there with a bunch of emotions. Like it makes you emotional. You always feel that emotion in a cinema.
Right.
So spirits hang out in those places, because it's essentially those emotions and things that we're feeling as humans charges them up. So they feed off that. So there's a lot of paranormal activity. And if you talk to people in theatre, most of them would have had experiences with the paranormal, with something that they just can't explain away.
Right. Oh, it's so cool. I love that. So one of the services that you also provide are angel readings. And I love angels so much. Have you ever seen an angel?
Yes. Real goosebump material. There's two forms that this can come in. So when I've meditated and things, yes, I've seen them kind of in that field, that realm, but also on the earth. And so I don't know if you believe in this, but I do believe that they walk the earth and they can take like a human-like form. There's been a couple of pivotal moments in my life where one of them, I remember I was going to TAFE. I was walking through Brisbane City going to TAFE years ago, and I went past this person and it was a woman, and she looked at me and I felt like she looked into my soul. And both times I've seen angels in human form, that's how I've recognized them, because I feel like they looked into my soul. And she looked at me, she had the most clear blue eyes I've ever seen in my life. And she said, "Michelle, what's the time?" And she used my name. It just walked up to me. I was just in the city, millions of people. And I said, "Oh, it's blah, blah, blah." And then she looked at me again, and she just had this look like, oh my God, it makes me emotional. Like she was looking into my soul. She sort of paused and then turned and walked off. And it wasn't until I was walking to TAFE and I left her that I was like, oh my God, she said my name. Like it didn't even, in that moment, I was just so surprised.
Yeah.
And I was like, what is she looking at, you know? And the other time I was a little bit it's quite funny. I was walking my dog through a dark park at night, as you do, around a lake. And I was getting a bit afraid. I was a bit like, oh, it's a bit scary. I'm a bit worried, you know, I don't know whether I should turn around. And there was like a lit area behind me, but I was walking away from the lit area into darkness. Anyway, I was a bit like, oh yeah, this is a bit much. I'm going to turn around and walk back towards the light. And then I just turned around and I heard this voice, and it was very, very high pitched, like a woman's voice going, "Don't be afraid," like this really pitchy voice. And I'm like, holy, and I've like jumped. And then this jogger was like right behind me. And I turned around and this guy has like run past me. And the same feeling as I got with that woman is I felt like he looked into my soul or something, and he had this t-shirt with just love or something on it. It was weird. And he's like running, and he came out of nowhere. And I'm like, what the hell? And it was this weirdest voice. And the strange thing about it is he ran past, and my dog was very protective of me, and especially being in the dark, my dog didn't react. It was like he wasn't even there. My dog did nothing, didn't bark, didn't growl, nothing, didn't react. And so then I kind of turned back towards the darkness to kind of see like where he'd come from, and then turned back towards the light, like towards where the street was, and he was gone. And it was a long path, and there were people walking up on the street.
Wow.
Where the hell did he go?
Yeah.
So it was weird, because I was scared, and I was like, I feel really alone, and it was dark. And then this person just appeared and said, "Do not be afraid." For some reason, it sounded like a lady with a very high-pitched voice.
Yeah. Well,
so I guess they come in all forms, but you know, people could say whatever they want to say about that. My feeling and my gut tells me that they were angels, and they were sent to look after me in some way. He did give me a hell of a fright, but yeah, there was a presence. There's always someone there. When you ask for it, there's always someone there.
Yeah. So I think that's one of the biggest things that I'm familiar with, is that sometimes people are struggling in their lives. Sometimes they need answers, they need help, and angels can't intervene without you asking them for help.
Correct.
So what are some ways that people can ask for help? I know you mentioned doing angel readings. Are there some other ways that people can ask for help without a deck, for example?
Yeah, I mean, it's as simple as that. It's exactly what you said. You just ask. You know, that's what I did. I was in the dark, and I was like, oh, please, you know, look after me. Like, I'm really scared. And it just happened. So It's literally just asking. And it wasn't like a super conscious thing for me. I wasn't like actually physically expecting someone to come and appear behind me. But, you know, that was just a bonus, I guess. It's as simple as just asking, like, you know, and you don't always have to ask, Lauren. We lost our dog before the dog we've got now. And we were going to the vet to go and see him and make the decision about what to do. And I was distraught. And I felt a presence in the car. I got a name of an angel. I looked her up. It was Ariel. And she looks after nature and animals. So she particularly looks after your pets. And it was so odd. I went into the vet surgery and I was sitting in the waiting room and I was so upset. And this dog walked in and it turned and looked kind of past me. So I felt her presence. I knew she was behind me. The dog turned and looked past me and walked straight over. It wasn't on a lead. It walked straight over and kind of sat just to my left. And its owner was like, oh, come on, what are you doing? Come on. And sort of tried to get it and it wouldn't move. It was staring just over my shoulder and I knew that Ariel was behind me and I didn't ask. But when you're super emotional and you're going through grief, there's an angel for grief and all different kinds of, you know, reasons.
Yeah.
They know that you need them. And it's almost like a primal kind of, you've called for help in a way, but it's more primal. It's not like a thought or anything like that, or I've spoken it. They just know when you need that support. And when you're grieving and you're going through a shocking situation, you're not in a position really to ask for that. Sometimes you are, sometimes you're not. I wasn't. She just appeared. She was in the back seat. I was telling Jason, Ariel's in the back seat. She looks after animals, and then we saw a sign on a license plate. I rely on license plates as signs often. And I saw this sign on the license plate and there was a number and I looked up angel cards and the number and it said, you're making the right decision. Because we'd pretty much made the decision that we were going to put him down. And I told Jason that and we're both very upset. But yeah, this dog, it just knew, was looking at her over my shoulder. So animals are super sensitive to that. So
if people wanted to learn more about the types of angels that there are and that can help them, do you have a resource that you use that you would recommend?
I probably use Google a lot. It's going to sound terrible, but because I always ask for a name. So if I have an angel come to me, and often Gabriel comes to me because he looks after communicators and writers. If I'm walking the dog for some reason, I might feel a presence and I'll be like, who is it? And I'll get the name and then I'll Google what they are.
Yeah.
So probably sounds terrible, but that's, you know, there's books and other things. Doreen Virtue's great. Like Doreen Virtue's written a lot about angels and I've got some of her little mini books explaining the angels and their purposes. But yeah, when I'm out and about and walking, that's generally what I do is I always ask for the name and what they do, what their purpose is. Yeah. So Gabriel tends to spend a lot of time around me. He's a bit of a messenger as well.
Yeah. So when you were talking earlier, you mentioned looking for signs. That's one of the things that I always aim to do as well. So whenever I see a heart in a random place or a leaf that looks like a heart or something, I always kind of imagine that that's the trail for me to follow. Or when I've had a difficult time or an experience and I see something at a place like that, for me, it feels like validation. I can see you nodding your head like you agree with that. So how do people find their own sign? Do they just
it's paying attention? It's paying attention, but it's also being present. And what a lot of us do is and this is why people go to see me, like to see someone like me for a reading, is because they're like, oh, you know, I don't know what's going on and this and that. And I'm like, you're not present. A lot of people who come to see me, they're living way off in the past. They're reliving events, unfortunate, unpleasant events. Or they're off in the future, wondering what's going to happen, what's around the corner, what's my next career going to be. We're not in the present. And what I tell a lot of those people, and I'll tell your listeners, is smelling a flower brings you straight back to the present. Doesn't work in winter, doesn't work at certain times of the year, but perfume doesn't have the same effect. If you have like essential oils and things, you know, they can have a similar effect. Yeah. But if you can get a flower and smell it, straight back to the present. When I'm walking, I'll pick a French penny or I'll pick one off the ground and I'll smell it as I'm walking, and that keeps me in the present. So that's one of the best ways to be in the moment. And that's when you see signs. When people are off in the past or future, you're not noticing these things. There could be all sorts of amazing things going on. You know, the clouds have taken on a particular formation or something incredible, and they're just not looking. They're just not noticing. You have to be in the present.
Yeah, I agree with that. And if anyone listening is interested in how to do that more, Eckhart Tolle with his book, The Power of Now, and his other book, A New Earth, can really help you with that. For me, also conscious breathing, like taking a deep breath in and out, really can help me to be here now.
centered. Yeah.
So I just had a few more questions before we wrap up today. If someone's at home and they're interested in communicating with angels or exploring their hidden talents, what are some suggestions that you would give for them to get started?
Mm-hmm. It's a good idea to have a mentor. I found that I didn't fully develop and sort of understand my gifts until I found someone who could sort of mentor me. So there's lots of people out there who teach in different areas, whatever you're interested in. So there's obviously medical mediumship, people who look at you and can kind of tell your health, issues and stuff like that. So it depends on what you're interested in. So if you figure out sort of what you want to learn about, and it might be just at a basic level, there's people who do like general courses, getting into readings and, doing different things like that. It really depends on your specifics, like what you want. But I really recommend getting a mentor because, as I said, some crazy things were happening in my household. And then I was like, you know what? I actually need someone to teach me how to do this because you can get into a bit of trouble.
Yeah.
So when you get into doing, paranormal work and stuff like that, sometimes just putting up a little bubble isn't enough and you need to know techniques around that. So I would say find a mentor. There's a lot of really good paranormal groups mentioned on Facebook. So people could look up, groups on Facebook and talk to them and just say, look, have you got someone there who, can show me the ropes or teach me what to do. But in terms of angels, I mean, we go into houses a lot with children. We're seeing things and experiencing things. And we're just like, look, Archangel Michael is fantastic. He's so tall and he's so strong and he has this big sword and kids love that, especially little boys. And you're like, he's really good at cord cutting. I was going to mention cord cutting before, in terms of people who work in hairdressing and social work and work where you're in contact with a lot of different people, a medical, doctor or something like that, where you're coming across a lot of people and you're exhausted. There's just cords all over you. You need to cut them. Archangel Michael with his sword, he assists with that. So he's actually a cord cutter as well, but he's also a protector. And so we use him with children. So if children are experiencing things and they're like, okay, I can feel something, there's something scary here. We get them to call Archangel Michael in, his big sword, and then he, protects them or he asks the spirit to move on, like to leave the little child's room. And so we find that really, really useful. So we tell parents that Archangel Michael is a good all-rounder, but then any angel that you want, to connect with, you just ask them, to sort of come in, and adults, it's the same sort of process, I guess.
Yeah, I love that.
What's the best piece of advice you've ever been given?
Trust.
Yeah.
What's all you've got?
Yeah.
It's not tangible. I'm sitting here looking at this person, I'm seeing all these things and I'm like, oh, I hope this is right. And I will say life experience as well.
Yeah.
Because I'm not the kind of person who gets my nails done, but I was doing a reading for a lady and I could just see, I was looking at people's hands and I'm sort of, doing this and I'm looking at their hands and I could just see this vision. I was like, oh, you're starting a business, but like you're doing something with hands. And because I don't do my nails, I was like, oh, maybe it's jewelry. So I was kind of going down that path. And she stopped me. And I'm one of these people, I'm very stubborn. I'm like, I don't want to ask for help, but I want to ask, on the right track. Because I don't want people to think I'm fishing.
Yeah.
So I was like, well, what is it? And she said, I do nails. I'm a nail technician and I want to start my own business. And I saw her business. I was like, you're doing the business. Cool. So once we realized it was a nail technician, I was off, but I was sort of going down the wrong path. You know what I mean? So sometimes it's asking, like it's having the courage. And that's probably my other piece of advice is having the courage to sometimes say, look, I'm not sure what this hand thing is, but I'm seeing you doing something with hands. Can we talk about that? And then I'm going to keep going. Whereas I sort of went off on this tangent and it wasn't right. But she knew that. She said, look, I can understand what you're looking at and what you're saying. So I didn't have that life experience. So that's really important for us as readers is we draw on that all the time because spirit will use an experience of mine so that I can relate to this experience in this other person's life.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of figuring out, but I would say life experience is super important.
Yeah, I agree with that. Michelle, what do you think happens to us when we die?
I've read a lot of, I'm very interested in near-death experiences, when I know you are as well. So I've read a lot about, that. And I'm sure you're familiar with the story where people sort of go in and they see their life play out. So up until kind of the point they died, they often see like a show reel, showing them all these different experience. Yeah, life review. So I guess, it's a difficult question because in some situations people might die in a sudden way, in a shocking way, and then they just they're here. and they're in that what people would consider like a limbo type situation.
Yeah.
Some people believe they'll remain there until they reach the age that they were supposed to have died at, and then they have the opportunity to go on.
Oh.
However, I know that in those situations, we can move them on. We can pre-out the light and they can choose to go through, even if it's like a suicide or something like that. Spirits will sometimes find their way to funeral homes and go through the light that way, because the light will stay there for about a week, I think 5 days after someone dies. So sometimes spirits can be guided to funeral homes and then they can move through the light that way.
Wow.
But they're attracted to that light. You know, people like me and people who do this sort of work, we're a bit like a flame, you know, and they're like a moth. So there's different things around, you know, how you die and what sort of happens. But if you go through the light's there for about 5 days. If that person chooses to go through light, they go through the light, and then they're on the other side. And then they sort of decide from there, what's my soul, you know, my next soul purpose going to be. You know, I guess they spend as much time as they want up there, and then they, you know, come back. And we've actually communicated with spirit. One of my friends is an amazing psychic medium, and one of the little spirits that she was talking to, a little girl, was saying that they were having a party for her friend. So they were all little spirits, and I guess they had lived before and died and all that sort of stuff. They were having a party for their friend because her mother was pregnant on Earth. So she was getting ready to come in, like she was getting ready to go into her mum's belly and be born. She was having this little party, all the friends were saying goodbye, and then what would happen, as we asked the little girl, is she gets her main guide. So we all have guides that we're born with. The guide accompanies her to Earth to be born, and she has this great big book, and the big book is all the stuff that we're supposed to remember while we're in our life. Gifts, you know, purposes, challenges, all of that stuff is written in this book. I don't believe in kind of a right or wrong path, but I believe that generally we have that gut and that intuition that tells us, you know, this is kind of a better path than maybe the other path. And then that is all predetermined in that book, and your guide brings you, and then you come into your mum's belly and you're born. So they were having a little sort of, party for her. And I just thought that was absolutely fascinating.
Is the book that you're referring to the Akashic Records? Is that different?
I think it's different because I've done regressions where I've gone in and I've viewed Akashic Records. Like I've gone in and sort of done that. And that it was like in a great big library, and that was fascinating. That was highly recommend regression to anyone. That was in a library, and it was you sort of go into a particular area, like you specifically say, this is where I want to go. I want to go to my records and go on and look at that. So I think that would be something different. And I was under hypnosis when I did that, so I don't have a lot of physical memory of that. I'd have to go back and listen to what I said. But I feel like this book, because the Akashic Records go back through all your past lives too. Whereas I think this one is more specific for this life, if that makes sense.
Setting you up for this life, yeah. Yeah,
this life specific. And I guess after you become a spirit again, that would be added to the Akashic Records. Yeah. If that makes sense.
Oh my God, it's so wonderful. Well, thank you so much. It's been a fabulous conversation. I really would love to have you back again. Maybe next time we can explore past lives, because we didn't really get into that too much today. And that's a whole amazing conversation that can stand alone, I'm sure. I understand that you might have a special offer for our listeners if they mention the afterlife. Can you tell me what that would be?
Yeah, so I love connecting. So I thought I'd offer a free mini reading, which is a 15-minute connection. So that could be anything, psychic mediumship, just clairvoyance, whatever people want, angel cards. So free 15-minute connection for anyone who uses the little code.
Awesome. And what we'll do is we'll leave your links to your Facebook, your contacts, and all that for people to redeem in the show notes as well.
That'd be awesome. Thank you, Lauren.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Michelle. Fabulous.